Welcome to Leadership Spotlight, a podcast that shines the spotlight on L&D and HR leaders from leading businesses around the world. Learn the ins and outs of everyday leadership, what it means to be a leader, and all the learning and skilling that goes into making a successful leader that you would like to follow. So lean in and lead on. Over 20 years of human resources and learning and development experience in diversified industries equips you with all the know how on leadership management, business transformation, and employee capability development. But it's the understanding of human psychology and the mindset that enables you to tap into the intrinsic motivation of your people to help them leverage their resilience, research, and reification skills for growth. Walking the talk on this learning landscape transformation at scale is Dr. Sunil Singh. The current founder and CEO at Mindstream Consulting and the ex-CHRO of Cadila Pharma, Dr. Sunil is a visionary beyond his business title. An IIM alumni, he is a leadership coach, business transformation expert, keynote speaker, published author, blogger, and researcher. His study and practice of human psychology, coaching, leadership development, talent management, change management, HR systems and processes, and HR automation enables him to decode the what, the why, and the how of capability development for self and for others. Hi, Dr. Sunil. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. My pleasure to be on your podcast.
Awesome. So, you have over 2 decades of experience in learning and development and human resources. You have an illustrious pedigree of qualifications from prestigious institutions and exhaustive list of achievements. So, take me on this journey that you have been on with milestones aplenty.
Let me start by saying that I'm a village boy who has come to this level so far. So I started from a small village way back, and then up till class 5, I was there. Then moved on along with the family to a small town called Jumri Tilaya. Did my class 12 from there, and then graduation and MBA from Ranchi. I'm a chemistry grad. Post my MBA from XISS, I moved on to my first job, which was with the public sector, and it was a pretty good experience out there. Been there in the center of India, which is Nagpur, for almost 6 years. Done a complete org transformation. I was leading the VRS out there. I did the complete manpower optimization, reduced the manpower numbers from almost like 6,000 to a level of around 2,000. Was also involved into closure of the first public sector, which was BGML, based out of Kolar. So I rate that as one of my most beautiful experience. That's the time, and probably for anyone, the first job is always going to be the most memorable one. So that's what it was for me in MECL as well. I remember the days when I worked on Sundays, I worked late nights, and people still ask me that how come there was so much work in the public sector. But believe me, that was one of the best experience. From there on, I moved on to do my PhD from IIM Bangalore. I give the credit of that to some of my friends, two friends I will call. One is Sanjeev and another is Chetna. They happen to be my classmates in XISS. So it's Sanjeev who gave me this idea that why don't you go for doctoral program from IIM. So I took his advice. I appeared for CAT, got selected, and from there onwards, it was a completely new life journey for me. 2003, I joined IIM Bangalore and got admitted into FPM program for HRNOP. FPM program has been a very, I would say, different experience. It's experience which transformed the industry professional into a researcher. It's a journey which was quite an awesome journey. compared to even my first job. So while I remember my first job as one of the most memorable one, this took it to the next level, converted a industry professional into a researcher. My area of research has largely been into the leadership, innovation, culture, HR practices, and as well as my PhD thesis was on socialization, which is in general terms people call it onboarding, but socialization is a larger experience than the simple onboarding. So my thesis was there. Being in a Bangalore campus, I presented multiple papers at international conferences, worked with industry. I worked on HR benchmarking for BPO companies in Bangalore. I did assessment centers for Novo Nordics. Quite a exhaustive, I will say, experience out there. And then from campus, I moved on to Hinduja Group. I was the head HR for Gulf Oil, which makes lubricant. Again, a pretty good experience with that group. Then my next stoppage was Punj Lloyd. Was there for almost 5 years. Uh, I was heading the global OD, L&D, and the performance for Punj Lloyd. Worked in the areas of competencies, e-learning, hyper-identification, development, leadership development. So that was again a good experience. That gave me a lot of global exposure. From there on, I moved on to Reliance, which was again a completely life-changing experience. That gave me a scale and size which probably no other company in the country can give you. I handled multiple HR transformation projects there. There was one project which well documented in the public space as well, which is the RHR transformation. I led the performance track. I was part of the talent track as well. I led the learning track for that. Being in Reliance, I conceptualized the LMS from the scratch. So that was my foray into the digitization journey. And having done all of that, there was a time when I needed to move on to higher assignments, and I joined Cadla as a CHRO in 2018. This was a journey where it has been a pretty good challenge to take up. In the industry, Cadla has been known for earlier low tenured HR professionals. But I took that as a challenge and thought that why can't I change this place with so much experience behind me? And thankfully, I got lots of success in terms of changing this place. In the very first attempt, I got this company GPTW certified, and I would say that's a good achievement. Normally, in the very first attempt, you don't get it. So that has been the journey so far on the personal professional front. If I have to describe myself in a few words, it's more. I describe myself as a researcher. I describe myself as a someone who has worked through transformations. I describe myself as a person who is more persistent, having lots of perseverance. So that's about me.
That's amazing. Having worked through so many diversified industries, having been through the traditional L&D into digital learning, having grown through multiple roles, and as you describe yourself, a researcher, a transformation agent, and a persistent and a perseverant person, let's talk about the importance of 3 R's, specifically resilience, research, and verification in leadership. Also, if you could share what these three mean, it would help us in setting the context better.
Yes, that's a fantastic question. In fact, for the first time, I've heard somebody asking this question, and it's a very interesting combination which you have added, which is resilience, research, and verification. So far, no one has asked me this question earlier, but it's a very interesting combination. I would like to take this. So, resilience has been and will be one of the hallmark of any leader or any leadership journey. Uh, Probably over the years, that has gone down in the ranking as a competency for a leader. But I say that COVID and this crisis have brought it at the forefront of the leadership competency or a skill, whichever way you want to define it, at the right now at the topmost skill to have. Resilience is not necessarily about getting stuck into scenario and just keep fighting. That's not resilience. Resilience is about, can I reframe the situation in a different way? If I keep fighting a problem or a crisis or any issue in the same context with the same definition, what you get is probably a very suboptimal solution. Leaders don't do that. Leaders like to frame a situation, frame a crisis as a learning agenda, and also as an agenda that, okay, probably I'm the chosen one to solve this problem. So it's very important is that you need to change the orbit from where the problem came to a new orbit, redefine it, convert into opportunity, and then solve it. And that's what differentiates a leader from a manager. It also means about evaluating the situation in totality, knowing what is in my control, what is in not in my control. And this is one, again, parameter which differentiates a leader from other. Leaders know that which are the things which you can't do. Leaders know that what are the things I can do. And there is no shame, there is no harm in saying that I don't know. If I meet a person who says yes to everything, then probably that's not the person whom I can describe as a leader. Leaders know that they can fail, and leaders are always graceful in accepting that they have failed or they don't know a particular answer. So that's what the resilience means for me, is that I'm extremely comfortable with a no. I'm extremely comfortable with failing, with not able to solve a problem. And that's perfectly all right because you are not God. Even if I look at the Indian mythology, even Rama has seven dosas. So if the Rama can have seven dosas, human can have multiples. So it's extremely important to be resilient, to know how to reframe, to know what I can handle and what I can't handle, and probably also gracefully leave the scene if I feel that no, I am not the one who can solve it, so that someone better can come and solve that. So that's what resilience means for me, and the way I define resilience for a leader. Research is more about, and that's a very interesting combination which you can put with resilience. Research is about, can I see myself operating from outside? So there is Sunil sitting out here in a room giving a podcast discussion with Panjali. At the same time, can Sunil be somewhere outside and see this another Sunil there and feel whether it's a good, bad, ugly, will be feeling happy about what I'm doing right now? And that view is very important view. A researcher typically comes from that. So manager typically gets imprisoned into a situation, imprisoned into a problem, imprisoned into an organization. Whereas leader can see the organization from outside. The leader can see the same problem from probably a outside view. And that's where the researcher's view is. And that's where this researcher view becomes important. It's not a view which is more about dissecting data. It's not about trying to do lots of analytics, but it's a researcher is actually a mindset. It's a mindset about impartially seeing a context and probably able to draw some insights about that particular context from an outside in perspective. Whereas a manager typically never comes out of the context. And that's where the researcher view is very, very important. Reification is a different one. So what is reification for me? Reification for me is can I, so once I have reframed, which I talked about in the resilience part, can I create a different image and make that a real image for everybody else? A leader typically does that, that I create a new reality and give a meaning to it. And my followers, people around me, is able to believe in that new reality. For example, so when I came into Cadla, it was not as an employer brand that great a brand, but I conceptualized the campaign, what we call is the happy shift. And employees rallied around that. They were able to believe that this can happen. And that is the job of a leader, that can you sell a new reality? Can you create a new reality which people believe in? You actually give a meaning to the image or the vision you have in your mind. So let me reconnect. Resilience is about reframing. Research actually helps you do that. And verification is about giving the meaning to the new frames which you have created through your resilient mind. And that's where the leader's role comes, is that can I connect all the three perspectives to create a better future, create a better meaning, create a better purpose for the people around me. Those are the reasons for which people follow you. Those are the reasons why people will probably die for you. If position remains same, the organizations remain same, but multiple people are seen differently. There can be at times a person who will come, who will go by the rule book, go by the SOP, and is not able to make any difference. Whereas somebody who might not have the probably best of the qualification, but still can come, reframe the situation, create a new meaning out of it from a very, very outside in perspective, and where then people respect that person, people follow that person. So these are the views, and that's a very interesting combination which you did, Prangi.
Very well explained, Dr. Sunil. And it's so critical because life as we know it, whether it be professional or personal, it's non-linear, which is where ups and downs, the peaks and the troughs will keep coming up. It is up to us to reframe it, as you said, to not look at failure as a mistake, but reframe it to look as a learning. And then maybe observe or self aware, having that self awareness to understand what is happening without having an inside out perspective, but rather an outside in view, and then creating a fresh perspective about it. I think that is what the summary of this could be. Interesting though that academics does not teach us these key life skills. Now, speaking about skills, you also speak eloquently about capability development, especially with respect to knowledge, attitudinal, and creative. How can L&D and HR cultivate this mindset in their people to seek and adopt it better? Because far too often, and this is my belief, that we are too comfortable in the known and we reject new learning because sometimes it is uncomfortable and because it pushes us to the extreme edge of our capabilities. What do you have to say about that?
I have got very controversial views around this, and I will talk from my Reliance experiences. So L&D, by far in the mother organization, the way it has been seen is that create plethora of programs, pack the rooms with the people without realizing that whether you are getting any benefit out of it or not. Many a times it has been converted as if a leader will come, speak, possible adrenaline rush happens in the room, you get a good feedback score, probably 10 out of 10, because speaker was a very good speaker. But ask the people after probably 10 days, probably 15 days, that did you apply anything out of that? And answer will typically in 99% cases will be no, or probably they will not even be able to recall that what was the key takeaway from that program. So they don't last for more than probably a day or two or three. You would have heard in many cases in the media and other pieces, probably a boy who was living his life on a road, studied under the street light, is able to crack a civil services exam. Whereas there can be a boy who is a very rich boy around whom the parents have kept all possible books, have arranged for all possible tutors, but still boy is not able to do what he or wanted to do. So what's the, I will say, secret sauce in the learning? The way I will describe it, and this is not something which is my model, I will give the credit to my boss in Reliance. His name was David Shelton. And he used to say that, see, Sunil, learning starts, it's like a funnel. So very first thing which you need to have is that a kind of insight that possibly there is a gap in me which needs to be bridged, which needs to be filled. Unless and until I have that insight, you can take me to a number of motivational sessions, a number of classes, a number of e-learnings. I will be able to come out of all of that completely unaltered. So the way I go in, the way I come out is the same. So the very first thing a person needs to have is that there has to be insight. So what's the implication for that for the L&D departments or capability building is that are you doing something around creating insight in the people? Are you able to create some kind of a connection with their career journeys, the life journeys, something the way they are positioning themselves in the society? Because those are the things which will help them have some kind of insights that what they need. Probably in my current role, I'm too bored, or probably that's the maximum I want to be in the corporate. and right now thinking about maybe going on an entrepreneurial journey. And if those are not connected, your L&D capability building, all investment is going to go for a complete loss. So very first thing which any L&D and capability building program or administrators should think about, what am I doing to create that insights into the employees? Because that's the beginning of any kind of initiatives which you will do. Second part of the funnel is what we call the motivation. So motivation is I may have an insight that I want to go on an entrepreneurial journey, or maybe I want to grow as a president in an organization in a function X or Y. But my life priority at this point of time is such that it's like a weight loss programs that probably a lot of people do have an insight that they have gained weight, but even with that insight, they don't want to do anything about it. They may laugh about it at some point of time, but they don't do anything about it. So, second most important point in this learning and capability journey is about motivation. So, how a capability building initiative or administration or the personnel is creating motivation around the different insights their people have. So, which is like I have an insight around three or four priorities or five priorities. Which one I'm really motivated about? Which one I really want to pursue? Which one I want to direct my energy on? That's the second step. And that's if you have that, then rest of the step becomes very, very easy. What happens currently is that most of the learning administrators, most of the capability departments, what they do is that they look at how fat is my catalog. I have got 20 courses running every day. I have got 100 courses running every day, and they feel proud about that. I will rather rate a department with just five programs or maybe just a one program running a month far more effective than those 100 programs doing every day. The fatness of the catalog have nothing to do with the real capability development on the ground, because catalogs and the content today primarily is available in abundance throughout internet. So if I really want to work on whether on my presentation piece or my negotiation piece or my grooming piece, or even to develop some kind of how to develop a procurement strategy or a supply chain strategy, or how to do some kind of a submarine design or a aircraft design, or even how to cook some kind of a samosa or dosa or a chicken. Everything is available online. So content is not the problem today, and that's where many of the learning departments, capability departments have failed big time, because they still continue to focus on that instead of focusing on the insight and motivation part of it. They focus on content part of it because that's far more easier. In earlier days, possibly you had to do lots of research, have to go through lots of books and create lots of OHP slides. But today you simply have to go cut, copy, paste, and probably your catalog is ready. So job has become far more easier, and that's why instead of doing five programs, now they do 100 programs with less attentive people, people who are bored in the classrooms or on the webinars as well. So focus is at the wrong place, because if insight is there, motivation is there, I will find out my weight loss regimen myself and go on it. So third step actually is the content part of it, but that is where the most organizations focus on. I will talk less about it. Fourth step in that is practice. That's also is an area which goes completely unattended. Some organizations do it. They do provide job rotation opportunities. They do provide project assignments. They do provide some kind of a mentoring opportunity. They do provide some kind of entrepreneur opportunity as well inside organization. But still, about I will say that 80% organizations don't do much about practice. So let me repeat what I said. First step was insight. Second step is motivation. Third step is actual skill development, the learning content part of it. Fourth step is practice. Having learned and which I can do myself, like the street boy example, reading under the street light and cracking the civil services exam. So that person didn't go to any coaching institute or didn't go to any tutor, but was able to find the content probably from a second-hand bookseller. So content was available even then, and content is far more available even now. So content is not the area where actually a learning or a capability building administrators should focus on. They should actually focus on the next step, which is the fourth step, which is practice. Having learned the concept, having learned the theories, having learned possibly how to do it, do I really get a chance to do it? So I'll give you an example from my MBA days. I was doing my summer project in Indo-Gulf Fertilizers, and one of the projects which was given to me was to evaluate the effectiveness of the learning interventions of Indo-Gulf Fertilizer. And there was a number of programs like program on boiler, program on compressors. There was an interesting program on computer skills. Those were the early days. So everybody was teaching, learning computers. So I met those people who actually went through that program. They said program is very good, but it's now about a year. We have not got a chance to work on a computer. So we have forgotten everything. And that's what happens with, again, most of the programs. So, for example, you take a person through advanced negotiation program, but don't give you that person an opportunity to really go and negotiate a deal or even shadow a deal. Then how come you expect that person to retain that skill or build on that skill? It's impossible. For a skill to get ingrained into a person, a competency to get ingrained into a person, when while you have given probably a 1 hour for learning, you need to give 10 hours for practice. That is the ratio. If you don't provide that thing, then your learning or capability building intervention is going for a complete. What is required in this domain is that organizations, the administrators need to take a risk with the people. Many a times, while they send a person for a particular program in the hope that this person will probably take a new role or a new assignment, or will I will move him to a new particular geography. But when the actual scenario comes in front of you, you start taking kind of lots of anxious calls. That will he or she really succeed? Should I really do that? All those things should have been thought in advance. Why now? Because now you are thinking that. That means you are saying that no, this person is not ready for the rotation. I can't risk with him a new project. I can't risk with this person even shadowing a new project. Then there is no point of doing the first three steps, or first two actually people don't normally don't do the third step. So your investment is lost. So we need to be far more prepared to take risk with the people. Once we have chosen them to go through intervention, organizations, the administrators should be readily giving them assignments where they can hone that skill in practice, because that is what will keep that skill or capability inside them for a longer period of time. Otherwise, they will forget it within probably a week or at most a month of going to that intervention. Last step in this funnel, what I will call a learning funnel, is accountability. Accountability is again area which is not touched upon by the organizations a lot. This is about keeping a track of the progress. So if the person have gone through a content or the intervention and post that a practice, is the person doing the things as per the schedule? Is there someone, a mentor or a coach or the manager or maybe the learning administrator or maybe the HR person who is following up with that person, that how is your progress? Do you need some kind of a refresher course? Do you need some kind of additional projects? Then only the real benefit of a learning intervention will be accrued to the organization. And last piece which I will add, apart from this learning funnel, we should not be taking anybody on the learning funnel unless and until a requirement is well laid out and described by the business team themselves. If that is not there, then the accountability of the business goes for a complete toss and everything else falls. So these are my views on the learning and development. What I always believe that when I will review any organization's learning content, the catalog, probably I will trim it down to 1/10 or 1/28 because that is not needed. What is needed is a insight. What is needed is a motivation. What is needed is a work on practice. What is needed is a accountability. The third step, which is the skill building, the content aspect of it, is available aplenty. And given a choice, individual can find a better course, a better content outside than by some mediocre faculty inside. So those are my views when it comes to learning piece.
Wow, you packed in so many insights and actionable steps that I'm sure will benefit everyone. I'll try to summarize a few takeaways and maybe some correspond to quotes which are already available and something that we know and resonate with. So, one, what I understand is that knowledge is a commodity. We don't really need to really focus on that alone. Second is, if you don't have the motivation, which is
Yes,
where another quote corresponds to this, in my opinion, which is when the student is ready, the teacher shows. The third one, which is about practice more so, corresponds to more of a science, which is a neuroscience. And it has shown us that if we don't put something in practice, our brain does not fire and wire the circuitry, which means you do not ability. There are new concepts of having an accountability
fully agree.
partner.
Yes.
You named a few, like having the HR or the L&D or the OD or the capability development managers or your line managers who can hold you accountable and ensure that you are on the right path to success, which is where I want to now focus on one of the key components that we spoke about. There is a very famous model that's there available on the internet right now, and it's called the mindset, motivation, and method model. What it essentially does is that it tries to intersect all of these, and the area where all of these three intersect is where the juice lies, or where the. What do you have to say about this particular, the intersection of mindset, motivation, and having the methods or the methodology to any kind of transformation, whether it be personal, organizational, digital, or whichever.
So this is a very interesting one, and I always believe that for any particular transformation, it begins with the mindset. It's like, is your soil ready for the new kind of seeds? And way back in Bangalore, I was doing a course with Professor Ganesh Prabhu, and this was a strategy process course. So there was a case study of British Airways transformation. Again, there is a Harvard case around that, and I had to design a process of transformation. So I'll come to your model, but what I created there is that transformation is like creating a new garden. So whenever you think about creating a new garden where already some kind of vegetation exists, the very first stage is about clean the field, because the vegetation which is existing at that point of time around that may not allow the new seeds which is required for the new landscape. So some of the unwanted vegetation have to be cleared as a step one. Once you have done that, then probably you go and work on the soil, just like a farmer. So that's the step which any farmer also follows before planting the new seeds for a new season. So old kharpatwar, what you call, gets cleared, then you make the field which is like a little more plain, and then the next step comes is the you seed. But once you seed, then comes the seedlings, and those seedlings have a lots of danger from the unwanted birds, unwanted stakeholders, because that's the time they are maximum vulnerable. So farmer will be around that farm, will do something so that unwanted stakeholders, unwanted birds don't eat away the new seedling, and that's the probably the motivation part of it. So you have done the mindset part of it, which is about creating the field for transformation. Motivation part is about how do I protect my transformation. So just like that farmer protecting the field from unwanted stakeholders, so that the new seedlings which is germinating is not eaten away at the very early stage. And once that is done, then the next part comes is that obviously the plants have now grown up, but there have to be a schedule of watering those plants, a schedule of taking the fruits at a particular point of time, and that's the method part of it. So whether you call it the mindset, motivation, and the method part of it, or you take this metaphor of the creating a new garden, any transformation do begin with what kind of mindset you have, what kind of value you want to create after the new transformation. And unless and until that is thought out at a first stage, transformation investment will not give you the result, irrespective of whom you will rope in to bring in a transformation. Even if you will bring in Ramcharan or bring in any of the big fours or anybody, if the mindset piece is not worked out well, transformation does not happen. So transformation by its word meaning itself is moving from one state of mind to another state of mind. So that's the way I look at it. And then you obviously you need to have a lot of motivation around it, and there has to be a method around it. But these three words actually follow the same sequence: mindset, motivation, and the method.
That's a perfect analogy and it drives the point home so beautifully. Sir, before I let you go, share your leadership.
So my mantra is fight the war which you can fight. You can't fight all the wars. You choose your own battle. You choose which battle to fight, which one not to fight. Out of the 100 problems which may be in front of you, probably there is only one which needed to be fought. The rest 99 should be ignored. And most of the times, many of the leaders become very, very ineffective by trying to fight all the hundreds together.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for distilling all of your experience and your expertise so eloquently. I'm sure it will benefit all of our listeners in their L&D, HR, and leadership journey. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for tuning in to Leadership Spotlight. To learn how you can go from learning to leading, visit www.plathoralearning.com. See you next time.